Okay, we're going to proceed to the third chapter of my autobiography, and that chapter is called John Boy. Before I get into the meat of the story or any of the following ones, I want to warn you that for the sake of authenticity, I am going to relay or print the dialogue, which in many cases will contain profanity. I want to make clear that the title of the story has nothing to do with Richard Thomas or the TV show The Waltons. Outdoor roller skating in the 1950s was completely different from present-day roller skating. For those of you who are familiar with the roller skates of the 1950s, you know exactly what I am talking about. For those of you who are not old enough to remember roller skates back then, I will try my best to paint a picture, in a manner of speaking, as to what they look like and the quality of their functionality. First of all, the skates were designed to fit just about any shoe you were wearing. They were made completely of metal, and you placed your shoe on top of the metal by sliding your toes in first through these paddle-shaped metal plates on the front of the skates that curved over the toe part of your shoes. At the back of the skate, there was a metal plate that your heel backed up against in order to prevent as much sliding as possible. You were also provided with a skate key for those paddle-shaped plates that curve over the toe portion of your shoes. The purpose of the skate key was to insert it into a specially designed slot, and by turning the key clockwise, the paddle-shaped plates would tighten over the toe portion of your shoe. There was a perforated leather strap attached to the skate slightly in front of where your ankles would rest. Essentially, the strap was like a small belt that went over the top of your shoe in order for you to tighten that portion of your feet more securely to the skate. As I said before, the skates were made entirely of metal, including the wheels. Depending on the type of surface you were skating on, it could be a smooth ride or one that would make your teeth rattle. You can imagine that skates such as these were not nearly as comfortable or as safe to maneuver on. Such was the case one morning. I was coming down a hill on my skates much faster than I should have been, and when I attempted to turn the corner on an intersecting street, I lost control and ended up in a drain ditch on the corner. My foot was caught in that storm drain. No matter how hard I tried or how much I twisted, I could not figure out why or any way to get my leg free. I became frustrated to the point of tears. I think I was 9 years old. I started to look around for help, and as I looked up the hill that I had recently descended, I saw John Boy headed my way. This exacerbated the situation and added to my anxiety. You see, John Boy was a member of one of the local gangs, and the closer he got to me, the more I thought, what the fuck am I going to do? John Boy had a reputation of being the biggest, baddest, and meanest guy in the neighborhood. Now, as bad as that may sound, local gangs were not the same as gangs today. Most of the members came from two-parent homes and were more the rebel type rather than the thugs, murderers, thieves, and rapists that populate many of the gangs that exist today. The local gangs back then would actually sing on street corners and then go out and pickpocket, shoplift, or get into fights. There were not any ethnic requirements or membership rituals that needed to be performed, such as drive-bys, in order to join the gang. The only requirement was that you are not opposed to raising a little mayhem and mischief, but also to fight with your bare hands to prove how tough you are. Most of these local gangs were named after their leaders, similar to the gangs of the Old West, such as the James Gang. It was just young teenagers trying to find their way, just as teenagers do today. Unfortunately, the influences are far more detrimental. You may be surprised that the majority of the gang members, at least in my neighborhood, attended school regularly. So back to John Boy and our impending meeting. I was scared shitless when I looked up and saw him standing on the corner looking down at me. As the saying goes, I felt like a fish out of water. Astoundingly, he sat down beside me and said, "How in the hell did you get yourself into this jam?" I explained to him how it happened, and he just started laughing. I did not know what to think now, but my fear had subsided considerably. He then proceeded to successfully help me out of my predicament, for which I thanked him profusely. I will never forget what he said to me next. He said, "I have hurt enough fucking people in my life, including many people who I love dearly, so I might as well help out a little shithead like you." The next day, he was found dead hanging by his tie, which he was required to wear to school, and though I had known him for a mere 15 minutes, I cried my eyes out. Even to a 9-year-old boy, an occurrence like this makes you realize just how frail human beings are. As kids, most of us keep secrets, the things we do from our parents, either because we think they will not be interested or we will get into trouble. I told my mom about this, and as I did, the tears started to flow again. I told her I knew where the wake was going to be held and that I intended to attend. She wanted to tell me that it would be improper because I never really knew him, but she never did, and I think that is because she could see how touched I was and that this tragedy was one of the situations of self-discovery that gives one strength as they move toward the trials of adulthood. I did attend the wake. I looked around the room, I saw other gang members, but more importantly, I saw the broken hearts of his family, especially his little brother, roughly my age, crying his eyes out along with so many others. I could see his mother staring at me, and I could see she was troubled because she had no idea of whom I was or why I was there. So before the time came, before people went out to the front of the room and told their thoughts about the deceased, his mom came over to me and asked me who I was. I told her exactly what happened. A few days prior to John Boy's death, and she began to cry even harder than before and asked me if I would do her a favor. Of course, I was surprised. I did not know what to say other than to ask her what she would like me to do. With tears in her eyes, she said that when it was time, she would like me to go up to the front and tell the others just what I had told her. I told her I would. I was terrified as I got in line to do what his mother had asked. When it was finally my turn and I stepped up to the podium, which I could barely see over, I saw all the confused looks of the people who did not recognize me. I told them of my conversation with John Boy's mother, and then relayed the details of what happened on the corner. As things were coming to the end, I went up to the casket and looked at John Boy, and knew I would never forget him. As I was leaving, there were people congregated out front, and as I started to pass through them on my way home, I received so many hugs from people that I had never seen before up until that night, and I could feel both their sorrow and gratitude surge through me. I also found that by hearing the memories of people who knew him well, I discovered a little more about him. It seems to me that, like any other teenager, he disguised himself so he could be accepted and popular. I cannot say for sure, but in the end, I think he found out that being accepted and popular out of fear was a hollow feeling. I can only surmise that because of my experience with him, he was turning a page. What I failed to see, due to the fact that I had survived the experience safely, that John Boy was not turning a page, but had come to grips with the fact that he was going to take his life. No one knows what could have happened if he decided to turn the page. What I do know, and it has been said before, that no matter the obstacles or heartbreaks or guilt that confronts you in life, that taking your life is not the answer. As I look back on that day, I am reminded of the lessons learned from that experience. Life is precious, and it is a gift. I also think of his little brother, and how that may have changed and affected his life. As I conclude the story, the words of Jimmy Valvano come to mind. Don't give up, don't ever give up. So simply stated, yet so true. Thank you, John Boy, for teaching me in 15 minutes what may have taken decades to learn. What intrigues me today is that I never found out his last name.